This is homework 5, and this is a second preview to solving quadratic equations with the quadratic formula. In the last preview video, you wrote out a little index card with the quadratic formula on it. Go grab that and have that in front of you as we solve this equation together. This is not a homework problem on your homework sheet, but it's vital if you're having trouble with these that you get a little extra practice on them. So come with and either just watch or solve it with me. We're going to try this problem. 2x squared minus 5x plus 1 equals 0. Maybe it's best if you just watch. Alright, as we start the quadratic formula problems, we could try factoring it. And in this case, these are hard to factor because of the coefficient of x not being 1. So you're better off just plugging it into the quadratic formula. So what we do first is we list our a, b, and c terms. A is always the coefficient of the x squared term. The coefficient of the x squared term in this case is 2. B is the coefficient of the x term. In this case, it's negative 5. See how I bring that negative sign with? Because the formula has a plus sign here, so if it's minus, it's like adding a negative. So B is negative 5. And our C, our plain number, is 1. Always make this list before you start, and you'll catch little mistakes like opposite signs. Alright, let's get our formula ready. We start with x. The solution we're looking for is the opposite of b. Again, I always say opposite of b because if b is negative, it's going to be a positive number. If b is positive, it's going to be a negative number. So opposite of b, in this case b being negative 5, is going to be a positive 5. Then we have our plus and minus sign. We have the big square root sign. And now under that square root sign we want our b squared. So go back, take a look. B is negative 5, and we want that squared. And then subtract 4. There's always a 4 in the formula. It's just part of the formula. Times a, which is 2, and c, which is 1. Alright, all of that, stretching a quotient bar from underneath the 5 to the end of the expression, all of that over 2 times whatever your a is. In this case, a is also a 2. This 2 is always there. This number will vary depending upon your equation. Now the next step is simplifying this expression. So let's take care of things underneath the square root sign first. Exponents first, then multiplication. Negative 5 times itself, negative 5 squared. Negative times a negative is positive. This term will always be positive when you simplify it. Think about why. Now, subtract 4 times 2 times 1. 4 times 2 is 8 times 1, so 8. All over 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, next step, a little more simplifying to do. 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 subtract 8 is 17, all over 4. Now at this point, you're smart to separate the numerator into two pieces, both over this denominator. In other words, to go like this: x equals 5 plus 5 plus or minus square root of 17, but let's put the 4 underneath each piece of the numerator, which is legal, because if I add these back together, think about what I'll get. You don't add the denominators, so the denominator is 4, and you add or subtract the tops, and this is what it would look like. So we can do that backwards. Now 5/4 we can change into a decimal or leave it alone. The square root of 17 over 4, we can calculate that with a calculator. So in other words, we can put this whole thing into our calculator, but first we need to break it into two equations because there's a plus sign here and a minus sign. So it's really two different solutions. One of them is 5/4 plus the square root of 17 over 4, and the other one is 5/4 minus the square root of 17 over 4. Let's take our calculator and find out what those values are. I'll start with this one. So, putting it into my calculator, 5/4, I have a fraction key, or I can use divide. I'm going to use my fraction key, 5, fraction key 4. That's also the decimal 1.25 if you want to make it a decimal first. And then we're doing plus, so plus. And now I'm going to put this quotient here, square root of 17 over 4, in parentheses, so that that dividing happens first. So square root sign, put in my 17, divided by, whoops, I got to close that out. Nope, not yet. Yes, I got to close that parenthesis. So I want to do the square root of 17 first. So close that parenthesis, and then divided by 4, and now close that parenthesis. So take a look at that. How I put in square root of 17 divided by 4. My square root needed to be in parentheses, and the whole quotient needs to be in parentheses. Alright, press equals, and I get about 2.2807. I'm going to round that up to a 1. So 2.81. Okay? 2.810 if we put a 0 where, excuse me, 2.281. There we go, 2.281. Misread my decimals. Now the other one needs a minus sign there. Now if you're fortunate enough to have a calculator like this one, I can actually recall the last equation and arrow over to where that plus sign was from this one and just change it to a minus sign. Now if you don't have a nice calculator like this, you just have to start all over, do the same thing we did when entering this one, but put a minus sign in between those two quotients. Alright, I got my minus sign there now, and this solution is going to be x equals about negative 219, positive 219 thousandths. Okay, as with most quadratic equations, there are two solutions. I'm going to rewrite this one so it's a little clearer. And they both work to make this side of the equation equal 0 when you plug one of them in at a time and test it.